Central Georgia, thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Not too much going on weather-wise throughout this week, but we do have a couple of fronts that are going to pass through, and those are going to be indicated by a couple of light shower chances. But then all throughout the work week, we are going to try to warm back up, but those fronts are going to keep our temperatures below average for the most part. Finally, a forecast that is going to feel a whole lot like January and feel more winter-like as opposed to spring-like, which we had last week. But first things first, let's go ahead and talk about this because we did have the first confirmed tornado in the state of Georgia over this past weekend. It was up in southern Carroll County. It was actually an EF1 that was only on the ground for just over a mile. 95-mile-per-hour winds. There have been some reports of damage here just to the south of Lowell, Georgia, and right there in between the plant Wansley. I believe that's part of the Georgia power plant right there. So some form of a nuclear power plant, but down in South Carroll County, pretty remote area. No reports of any injuries or any deaths with it, but there was their fair share of trees down, some power lines down, and obviously EF1, not the lowest criteria that we can see for a tornado, but thought this was interesting because we did have our fair share of severe warnings outside of central Georgia this weekend. Very thankfully, none of those did come to fruition here in central Georgia, but we had a couple very close to us over on our westernmost counties. But speaking of those weekend showers and a couple of storms, obviously our rainfall totals are not even comparing to what's up to the north and the northwest. Most of the rain did fall over in northeastern Alabama, northwestern Georgia, but as you go down here and start to see some darker shades of blue, you can see western central Georgia actually lucked out with the most amount of rain this past weekend, which is a good thing because those areas in western central Georgia do continue to find themselves somewhere within the moderate drought conditions, or actually I believe it's the severe drought conditions, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So in terms of some of your localized areas, how much rain did certain areas get? Maybe just above about 1/10 of an inch in areas like Milledgeville, Gray, 1.2 inches just to the east of Jeffersonville, pretty close to our radar over there across the county line into Wilkinson County. Just simply a trace of rain in Sandersville, 2/10 of an inch, 3/10 of an inch in Macon and Roberta. But as you go up here into areas like Pike County, getting just into the southern end of Spalding County, over here to Lamar County, actually Pike and Spalding counties is an area where we did see a severe thunderstorm warning pop up this past weekend. And I imagine that's what helped contribute to some rainfall totals in some isolated pockets outside of Zebulon, around 1.5 inches in nature. But now we go down to our southern half of central Georgia. You can see some of these areas that we do have a couple of isolated spots where there are some green shades indicating some totals like 1.3 inches of rain, 1.9 inches of rain, another 1.3 there in Perry, and 1.4 up in northern Taylor County. Everyone else, just a couple 1/10 of an inch of rain and just simply a trace of rain. Like I mentioned, some areas down to the south and the southeast, they had a far less chance of receiving some rain this past weekend, and we saw a good stretch of areas including McRae, Alamo, all the way over to Vidalia, and even portions of Soperton with no recorded rainfall whatsoever, not even a singular drizzle. So that frontal boundary really lost its intensity as it pushed farther and farther down to the southeast, but some areas in west central Georgia did get lucky with a little bit of rain. Here's a look at what we recorded here at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, just over 1/4 of an inch of rain to put our total at 0.87 inches so far in the month of January. Not necessarily at a bad pace, but we are still a little bit behind where we should be because we have to make our way up to 4 inches of rain in order to reach our average rainfall for the month of January. And our record doesn't look like we're going to be hitting that or getting anywhere close to that at around 13 inches of rain. So creeping closer and closer, and eventually by the time we get into the end of this work week, we will be at the halfway point for the month of January. But we do have a couple rainmakers on their way throughout this week. And remember, last week's drought monitor going to take into account this past weekend's rain, and most of those rainfall totals, the highest totals at least, were found kind of in this cluster right here from Taylor County to Macon County, portions of Crawford and Peach County. So hopefully that will continue to help out with the severe drought conditions that lie in western central Georgia. Everyone else still in a moderate drought criteria, but this is as of the January 6th update. So this is as of last Tuesday. And remember, we get the release every following Thursday. So the main headlines, kicking off a cold spell of weather. Like I mentioned, we're trading that spring-like forecast from last week into a winter-like forecast as we go into right in the smack dab middle of the month of January, really kind of right there in the middle of the winter season. We should be heading into maybe a warmer portion of winter as we go into February. However, nonetheless, we are finally going to get some temperatures that feel more appropriate for this time of year. A couple days with rain chances on your 7-day forecast. We'll talk about which time frame in your short-term and your long-term forecast does have the best potential for seeing a couple scattered showers and bringing back the winter coat. You are going to need that present all throughout this work week. There will be some days that maybe have some slightly better feeling mornings, maybe some temperatures that are slightly warmer, but overall it is going to be a predominantly chilly forecast each and every day. A walk around the quad right now does show plenty of blue sky, but also some high and wispy clouds, those cirrus clouds that are maybe blocking a little bit of at least the blue color in the sky, but not blocking any of the sunshine whatsoever. Plenty of sun down in Warner Robins, downtown Dublin, the Georgia National Fairgrounds, and up here in downtown Macon, which is a pretty beautiful image, getting an indication of some of the shapes of some of those cirrus clouds. But nonetheless, you can see down here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, I flipped the camera over to show the western gate. So this is facing over to the west, and these flags are blowing from left to right, indicating that there is a bit of a southerly breeze component right now, as opposed to the northerly component we've had with our winds as of recently. So it does maybe indicate that there are some variable winds present, and these wind arrows maybe not necessarily true to what they're actually blowing at right now down in western Houston County. But temperature-wise, upper 30s and low 40s. Over the last couple of days, it feels like we've already been talking about numbers somewhere in the 60s, maybe even on the cusp of the 70s. So definitely a good drop in those numbers and keeping that light blue color in the forecast down here in the south and the southeast. But this cold spell is not just for us here in central Georgia. Everyone over here on the eastern side of the United States is feeling the implications of that front that did pass through this past weekend. It is a little bit warmer back over into areas like Texas, Oklahoma, maybe some portions of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And those are the areas that saw the passage of the frontal boundary a little bit earlier than us. So they have begun their quick warm up as the frontal boundary did pass through earlier. They got that cooler and drier air a little bit earlier, maybe say sometime on Sunday, as opposed to where we finally have it now on Monday morning. 50 degrees in Dallas, 51 in Houston, 52 in Laredo, 64 down in Orlando. That is definitely a bit of an outlier and definitely the warmest number by a pretty good margin compared to all the other numbers you see here. But 41 in Macon, very similar, exactly the same temperature as what we see in Charleston, and very similar to the temperature in Montgomery over there at 39 degrees. Dew point temperatures, those have taken a substantial drop too. Very, very dry air has filtered into the forecast. So what this means is, yes, we're not going to be dealing with any of those foggy skies in the mornings now that we don't have moisture present at the surface. However, what this also means is you're probably going to start noticing maybe some cracks on your knuckles and maybe some dry skin. Make sure that you are moisturizing throughout the next couple of days as these frontal boundaries do come through. That dry winter air can typically result in a little bit of the cracking of some skin, maybe some chapped lips, and just make sure that you're utilizing that chapstick and that lotion pretty frequently during this time of year, because obviously once you get to the summertime, you don't really have to worry about that too much since we keep moisture in the forecast, and obviously that keeps your skin pretty well hydrated. So here's a look at your winds and your wind gusts. This has been a factor throughout this morning and is still currently a factor because the winds are definitely not that gusty. However, even a breeze up to 5 to 6, maybe even 7 or 8 miles per hour, 9 miles per hour at the most, that can have an influence on the feels like temperature. So yes, they're not near as gusty as yesterday, but we're still holding on to some of those breezy conditions from yesterday, which are resulting in feels like numbers still hanging out in the upper half of the 30s, farther down to the south and the southeast. Farther up to the north, temperatures and feels like temperatures are about the same, but there is a little bit of a difference in areas farther down to the south where the winds are still a tad bit breezy early this morning. Well, really early this afternoon, rather, I should say, here at the 11 a.m. hour. 62 degrees, that was the high temperature yesterday, and you probably didn't notice it too much. You probably noticed a bit of a chill in the air because we finally had those winds that were making that temperature just try to feel a little bit cooler as that cooler air mass made its way in real time throughout yesterday afternoon, but not quite quick enough because 62 degrees still just slightly above average. Your morning low temperature was actually 1 degree below average for a change. Started out at 35 degrees yesterday, 36 is your average low temperature, and I can confirm we got down to around 27 or 28 degrees in the Macon area this morning. So it has been a very warm spell, and believe it or not, 84 degrees. That's actually the record high temperature for the month of January all time here in central Georgia, and that was set back in 1949. We weren't too far off that threshold as of Saturday afternoon, where we hit the 80-degree mark for a high temperature. But then there's always the other end of the spectrum. And then you can see 4 degrees was a record low temperature back in 1982. And we were doing a story this morning on, I believe it was an Elvis costume party that people were running around dressed like Elvis in Australia. They had a whopping temperature of 104 degrees down under in Australia. But a good reminder, it is summer down there as it is winter up here in the northern hemisphere. But I don't even think our high temperatures got up to 104 degrees as of last summer, but they hopefully don't have as much humidity as we do, because we definitely saw some feels like numbers well above that threshold. No rain recorded yesterday, but your year departure of rain just over a ½ inch below where we should be, at exactly 0.68 inches below where we should be at this point in the month of January. We've only had about 2 rainmakers come through. This makes sense that we haven't necessarily seen the average amount of rain that we should see a couple days into the beginning of the new year. And sunrise time, 7:37, hasn't really changed. Sunset time, 5:48 p.m. So that sunset continues to get a little bit later and a little bit later. And also, we are seeing a decrease or a later sunset time a little bit more frequently than we are seeing change with that sunrise time. Right now the sunrise is now beginning to creep a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier, but we are seeing the sunset get later and later a little bit quicker than the sunrise is getting earlier. So January high temperatures started out with a good stretch of just above average numbers till we got to last Tuesday. Then we entered the 70s, 72 degrees for a high temperature, and then we went on a stretch of some near record high temperatures. 77 degrees, that broke a record last Wednesday afternoon. The record high temperature stood at 76 degrees all time before then. And then 79 degrees, which was your high temperature on Friday afternoon. That number did match a record set back in, I believe it was 1949, because that was just a record warm year that we did see during the month of January, and we hit 80 degrees, but this actually fell 1 degree short of breaking the record of 81 degrees on Saturday all time. But then yesterday, even though we finally got the numbers back a little bit lower than, say, the upper 70s or near 80, we did still see an above average number of 62 degrees compared to that average high temperature of 59 degrees. So each and every day for the month of January so far has been above average for your high temperatures, bringing the tally up to 11. However, I anticipate 11 is where that streak does end, because today going to feel a lot more like a January afternoon and a high temperature of 53 degrees. Now we may go up to about a 54 or 55. I could see that because the recent trend once again has been going above what the models have said. I leaned a little bit closer to what the models said this morning, but definitely on the upper end of the range. But nonetheless, even 54 or 55, still a handful of degrees off of that average high temperature of 59 degrees. I have very good confidence that today will put an end to the streak of above average high temperatures. However, we will talk about the next couple of days because we could see the return of maybe some slightly above average days for at least a brief time period as we head into the midweek. But given how dry we are and how the breeze is still lingering in a select few spots, remember that current winds and wind gust map? I showed you some gusty winds that were still remaining in our southern counties. So we do have a fire danger statement, and it's really for southeast central Georgia. You can see the counties outlined over here on the right are going to be Dooley, Crisp, Pulaski, Wilcox, Bleckley, Dodge, Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery, Toombs, Emmanuel, Trutland, Lawrence, and Johnson counties. So south and southeast central Georgia, mainly for the fact of relative humidity, 20 to 25%. It's a very dry environment. That's essentially what it's saying. Winds, northeasterly winds, less than 10 miles per hour. That's exactly what we did see on the current winds and wind gust map. Maybe some gusts up to 9 miles per hour as of right now, but we are expecting the breeze to continue to subside throughout today. And just a whole lot of dry fuel. These areas down here, they lucked out with not near as much rain as areas up in the north and northwestern portion of the state of Georgia did get. So that's why those areas are not having to deal with anything in the way of fire danger statements. We still have a very dry environment in our south and southeasternmost counties. So what this means, outdoor burning is just going to be discouraged throughout today. and throughout this afternoon into the early evening. And I would anticipate maybe another one of these to get issued throughout tomorrow, as we aren't anticipating any increase in the moisture and we're not really indicating anything in the way of rain chances. So hour by hour, we see the warm up to the 52-degree mark according to this meteogram. Again, I went a little bit above at 53 degrees for a high temperature, but the bigger story will be this evening. If you have any plans to go out to dinner, it is going to be a chilly environment. I mean, 52 degrees already in the heat of the day is a pretty chilly environment, but we're going to drop back down into the 40s as early as 6 p.m. and the numbers are very likely to get into the upper 30s, I would anticipate, as we go into around 8 to 9 o'clock when you are walking out of the restaurant, maybe for any dinner plans that you do have. So satellite and radar, it does look quite cloudy. It looks like this is a very overcast start to the afternoon. Well, this is in the form of higher level cloud cover, so it's not doing a good job of blocking the sunshine, even despite the fact that it may be very widespread and looks like a gloomy picture on your satellite and radar imagery. And that's the case really all across the southeast. We have a lot of higher level cloud cover, nothing that's doing a good job of producing anything in the way of precipitation, and nothing that's blocking anything in the way of some sunshine. So let's go over to your surface map where you can see our frontal boundary that passed through this past weekend has made its way all the way through Florida, but hasn't necessarily ushered in that cooler and drier air all the way down to areas like Orlando and Miami. But nonetheless, high pressure has filtered in down here in the deep south for the United States. This high pressure will continue to keep things pretty quiet until we see a cold front start to kick into gear that's originating up in southern Canada. That's going to be our next weather maker, but it's still going to take some time for that to originate, kick into gear, and sweep all the way down through the south and the southeast. But we can see signs of it ahead on future view. So for the rest of today, some passing high-level clouds, nothing that's going to really influence your forecast whatsoever. Expect today to be on the chillier side, but not as much of a breeze as we did have as of yesterday afternoon. Now let's go into Tuesday morning. Looks like another crystal clear start to the day. Beautiful sunrise in order and less cloud cover throughout your Tuesday afternoon. I think we can classify Tuesday as a crystal clear afternoon with plenty of those deep blue skies. Going to be absolutely amazing and a little bit warmer than today for any outdoor plans that you may have in the afternoon. But then things start to change as we go overnight into early on Wednesday morning. This is around 3 a.m. where cloud cover starts to surge up. And within some of this cloud cover are going to be your fair share of some lightly scattered showers. But it does look like there's a good clump of more widespread rain that starts to arrive sometime around 6 a.m. as many of you are getting up, making your way out the door. So what I would anticipate for Wednesday morning, maybe a bit of a messy morning commute. But the rain is not going to be too substantial in nature. It's not going to be a huge washout and maybe something that you want the umbrella for as you're walking into work, maybe heading out to the bus stop and such. But I do anticipate some clearing in the cloud cover and those rain chances as we head into the afternoon. But along with that, we are going to start to get some gusty winds in place. So maybe some gusts up to 25 to even 30 miles per hour throughout Wednesday afternoon and continuing into the evening. And that is going to be because those rain chances that you just saw and the cloud cover that passes through during the first part of your Wednesday, that's going to be frontal boundary number 1 of 3 that we're going to be talking about over the course of this week. Frontal boundary number 1 is followed very closely behind by frontal boundary number 2, which does come in sometime during the evening hours on Wednesday. Some passing cloud cover, you'll see your fair share of lightly scattered showers once again. And now I made the pause point at 10 p.m. because I wanted to show you, yes, we have the potential for a couple of light rain showers, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that we do see some white and we do see maybe even a little bit of light blue, light purple. That is going to indicate some precipitation of the frozen variety. I have no confidence in that here in central Georgia. We're going to go ahead and shut that down. As of right now, your temperatures will be too warm. We're not looking at a very conducive setup for anything in the way of frozen precipitation on Wednesday. Now, higher elevations, specifically the North Georgia mountains, they have the best chance of seeing something, maybe a brief flurry shower. I don't imagine anything's going to really accumulate or get close to sticking, but they may have a few flurry showers Wednesday evening into the nighttime hours, maybe lingering into Thursday morning. But as you can see, we progress during the overnight hours into early morning on Thursday. The one thing that you need to be aware of is that, yes, Thursday morning going to be mighty chilly and mighty breezy as you walk out the door. So wind chill values are going to be a big factor as we go into Thursday morning. But frozen precipitation, go ahead and throw that idea out the window. I hate to be the one to burst your bubble, but obviously this time of year we need a number of different things to come into focus and a lot of different things to coordinate in order for a snow event to happen. We had the perfect storm of it as of last year, not seeing any signs of it as we go throughout this week. Now let's take a look at your winds and your wind gusts. Not too much of a breeze throughout today, but then we go into Tuesday. Still nothing really in the way of some breezy conditions, but we do see some breezy conditions finally filter in as we go into Wednesday morning. Not as much as what we see in Wednesday afternoon. Gusts up to 25 to 30 miles per hour, like I was mentioning, a very gusty afternoon. And then frontal boundary number 2 arrives, and that's going to be the one that sends those frozen precipitation chances up here in the North Georgia mountains. But it is going to create some breezy conditions, not only Wednesday night, but also lingering into the morning hours on Thursday. Take a look at this, 6 a.m. Still some wind gusts up to 25, maybe even 27 miles per hour. So depending on what the temperatures are for Thursday morning, I do anticipate that the numbers are going to be a good deal cooler than that, paired up with some very gusty winds. So here's a look at the next 3 days. 53 degrees for a high temperature on Monday, then up to near average both Tuesday and Wednesday. 60 degrees for a high temperature tomorrow and 59 degrees on Wednesday. And that's because we do get the breaks in the cloud cover. So that 20% chance of rain, I would highlight the morning hours, but we also have that other rain chance that comes in courtesy of frontal boundary number 2. That's going to be in the evening hours. So 20% chance of rain, that should kind of cover the bases for those morning showers that you could see on your morning commute. And then maybe a couple of early evening light showers that could still be in the cards. Honestly, we might give this rain chance a bit of an uptick, closer to 30 to maybe even 40%. It did look like the coverage of rain is starting to increase. But note your temperatures, 39 degrees for a low temperature and 59 degrees for a high temperature throughout Wednesday. I don't anticipate the temperatures to be cold enough for anything in the way of frozen precipitation to occur. However, as we go into Thursday morning, that could be a little bit of a question mark, but I do anticipate that the frontal boundary, the one thing causing some of those precipitation chances, is going to already have moved through by Thursday morning, and that's why we are going to see some cooler temperatures throughout the day on Thursday, because cooler and drier air will have already filtered in. So we see a brief rebound in the temperatures, getting them back to right there around average, just above average for both Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons. And then as that frontal boundary comes through later on Wednesday night, down into the 40s, upper 40s for high temperatures on Thursday afternoon, 51 on Friday, not feeling too different. It just has a 5 in front of the number, only 3 degrees warmer than what we have forecasted for Thursday afternoon. So your morning low temperatures still expecting to be just below freezing both today and tomorrow. Well, I guess we already saw that as of early this morning. Then 39 degrees for a morning low temperature on Wednesday in light of the increase in cloud coverage. And then right there around freezing temperature as we go into Thursday morning. But again, with that breeze that is going to be present, I do anticipate feels like temperatures to be well below 32 degrees and then 22 degrees. So it looks like the air that is coming in behind these frontal boundaries around the midway portion of this week is even colder than what we've had to deal with at the start of the work week this morning. So go ahead and prepare yourself. And like I said, keep the winter coat handy all throughout the next couple of days. And in terms of the humidity, just wanted to mention that there's really going to be nothing in the way of moisture in our forecast. So keep this in mind. With each of these passing systems that come through, we are going to have a moisture-starved atmosphere. However, I will go ahead and tell you one thing that not necessarily buying according to this. We typically see a lot of disagreement, I guess you could say, or a lot of up and down, maybe discrepancy with this graphic as we go out to the end of it. So specifically sometime around Thursday, Friday into Saturday and Sunday. I'm not sure if those dew point temperatures are going to be entirely accurate of what's ahead. We might see a little bit of a rebound in moisture. However, right now my general thinking is it is going to be a very dry week ahead. Not too much in the way of surface moisture to work with for these passing frontal boundaries, and the National Weather Service has highlighted that thought as well. So here's a look at the long-range models where we still hold on to maybe a few spotty showers during the early morning hours on Thursday. I think this is just trending a little bit behind what FutureView does have. I think most of our rain should be out of here on Thursday, but I've still elected to keep a very slim chance of rain as of right now to cover the bases. Now we go into Thursday evening, looking crystal clear, great into the fourth day of your work week. And then as we transition into Friday, this is obviously a day that many of you are going to be looking forward to because many of you may have some trips out of town and such because it is a 3-day weekend ahead. Friday, 7 p.m. Forecast looks crystal clear, looking good to go. Now we go into Saturday, where we could see the return of a spotty shower or two, not really putting too much stock into that. And then Sunday morning. Now this is where a couple of question marks are going to be because the European model, obviously hinting at your fair share of widespread rain, not only in the state of Georgia, but down here along the panhandle of Florida, getting into areas of southern Alabama. This is just what one model does say, and you probably will see it a lot thrown out in social media, that the European model is hinting at this precipitation on Sunday morning to be of the frozen variety. So yes, this is another model that I am going to have to shut down those rumors. As of right now, we are not forecasting anything in the way of winter precipitation. This is the only model that is picking up on rain chances or anything in the way of frozen precipitation chances as we go into Sunday morning. As you see, the GFS not really putting too much stock into that. And right now, my general thinking is we just don't have enough moisture in the forecast to produce something in the way of widespread precipitation chances, whether it be frozen or whether it be liquid in nature. But say that situation is to occur, at the very most, I think we would receive maybe a couple hours of a flurry shower and then it would be out of here. The ground would be too warm to stick. Now that is a prediction I have little to no confidence in, so don't go getting your hopes up whatsoever. I did want to go ahead and mention the possibility of it, and then just as quick as it does arrive, it is already out of the picture. That frontal boundary possibly bringing some rain chances is on out of here, and it dries us out for the end of the weekend and into the beginning of next week. It's going to be that one last reinforcing push of some cooler and drier air. Then I do anticipate a pretty quiet stretch of weather as we go into the beginning of next week. And going into the midway portion of next week, we should start to see the numbers make the rebound back up to average and some high temperatures feeling a little bit better, just slightly above average, somewhere in the mid 60s. I do anticipate past your 7-day forecast, but we still have a ways to go before we get there. So here's where the 7-day does stand, a complete 180 of what we did see as of last week. We were talking about high temperatures in the upper 70s, near 80 degrees. Well, now we are going to have a good stretch of some below average high temperatures each and every day, with the exception of tomorrow and Wednesday. So we are going to see that brief rebound in the temperatures. But just as they do rebound to around that average mark, those frontal boundaries, number one, early on Wednesday morning, and number two, a little bit later Wednesday into early Thursday, they will pass through and they will put a halt to that warm up and drop the numbers back down towards the end of the work week. High temperature of 48 on Thursday, and then Friday morning looking to be the coldest time period that we do have throughout your 7-day forecast, with a low temperature of 22 degrees. And say if we keep the breeze around that we're holding on to for Thursday morning into Friday morning, feels like numbers are very likely to dip down into the teens. So yes, it is going to be a continued cold spell of weather, but at least pretty appropriate for the month of January, I will say. And then we'll try to see the numbers rebound into the mid 50s by the time we roll into Saturday. Does look like, once again, we get another frontal boundary to come through sometime between Saturday and into Sunday that will drop the numbers back down. And you may notice that these numbers, yes, they are slightly below freezing temperature, but once again, we're only seeing one model run out of all the plethora of models that we do look at that is showing something in the way of wintry precipitation. I'm not putting too much stock into it. If it is something that we do see trending the other way and we start to see more models getting on board with that European model, we will of course let you know. But right now it's about 5 to 7 days out. Typically we're trying to get pattern recognition this time of year when we are trying to nail down something in the way of some wintry weather, and we have no model agreement whatsoever. So we are trying to get a better idea of it. Right now I would plan on maybe a very slim chance of seeing some rain. However, don't go getting your hopes up. I do anticipate maybe by tomorrow the European model won't even be showing anything anymore because it is going to be a moisture-starved atmosphere, and that's what I keep coming back to, especially after the passage of multiple fronts throughout the work week this week. We are going to get that reinforcing push of cooler and drier air, not only once, but it does look like twice as we head into the end of the weekend. But I do anticipate the forecast to still be very dry and very chilly as we go into the beginning of your weekend. We'll of course update you if anything is to change with that. So that's where your 7-day forecast and the week ahead does stand. Right now it is looking like pretty good weather, at least plenty of sunshine compared to what we did see as of last week with the foggy starts. So continue to soak up some of those semi-warm afternoons that you will see Tuesday and into Wednesday. But then after that, I think it's going to be a forecast that you definitely need some layers for as you walk outside. And go ahead and make plans to have the rain jacket handy, especially Wednesday morning, maybe into Wednesday evening, and possibly even as late as Thursday morning for that morning commute. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you once again here at 11 a.m. tomorrow.